Welcome in, everybody. Let's go over Heroic Wander, a long-awaited video. Let's go over as much about it as I possibly can. This is a time-limited event. This is the third cycle, and there's only 3 days left on it. Currently, there are the bosses for Human, Acer, and Elf released up to this point. This is endgame PvE content. 95% of newer players aren't going to be able to scratch the surface of this. In my opinion, I wish this content weren't so exclusive, and I wish more people could enjoy it, but anyway, Nordicia came first, so let's check it out. Let's start with the little booklet info. One night, an unidentified life form fell upon the world from the skies above. Our brave heroes travel across various realms in search of its origins. In the kingdom of Nordicia, the group encounters Roveria, who has been tainted with darkness and is now branded a fugitive. In order to save her and the rest of the world, the journey of the heroic wanderer begins. Alright. So each area will have 3 bosses, but you'll need to be able to clear all 3 to get the true rewards, which is the gold orbs. Once you've started to clear through a group, you can reset your progress if needed. Once you get the clear on the 3 bosses, you can reset them and then get the rewards again, pretty much. Now, I'll be spending less time on the Acer and Elf areas, because the humans probably the easiest one to get into. These are all EX3 difficulties, and instead of crystals or ads, they have organisms. They're magical airborne male beasts. The majority of the time, you will be focusing on destroying the organisms before the boss is able to be killed. These bosses will have very punishing CCs for the races that are not intended to be brought. There is not much workaround in most cases to try to bring off races. There is a high field, so you will need field rings, and Omega Bomber is a mechanic we cannot ignore yet. This is basically like an advanced time bomb, and it will deal massive damage once applied after a certain number of turns. As of this 3rd cycle, there are 42 heroes that are on ranked for Roveria. Now, ranked is not always reliable, because there's just not enough quantity of clears coming through. Similar situation with Grace, there's 39 on ranked, but you can see most things that aren't prevalent are very low, and somebody figured out how to make them work. If they're less than 3%, that's only a couple people using them. And Creamy is the most punishing of the trio, with only 15 on ranked. It's much more difficult as far as hero usage. But anyway, back to Roveria comps. The sad part is, if you don't have the heroes, you really can't try it. You've got to have the heroes, and you've got to have the gear. You also have to have the artifacts and the emblems. You can't be slacking on any part of the team building here. Now this cycle, I was able to clear Roveria without using Lif from bringing Choco Erd. That way I can try to use Lif on Creamy. And Grace was not too much of an issue with my usage. I was able to clear it with a couple different things. The most important thing being to still save Lif. Now this is kind of also where you can't fully trust the ranking system. Now, as strict as the ranking may be, there are some times where you're able to pick somebody else through good team building. So in the case of Creamy, you can bring Human, Dwarf, Therian, and you really need to focus on Water and Light. There really isn't much of a need to bring other elements. So if we go down to Human, Dwarf, Therian, Water, and Light, 4 heroes that I'm bringing are ranked. I've had great success with Mikasa here as well, since she is human, and she brings an additional water element resistance down that stacks with Rimaru's, as well as providing 30% water amp to all members of the team, and she even gives Lif significant odds. This type of gearing can be very stressful and take a lot of trial and error. This is my most recent attempt and personal best on the Creamy, and I'll put up the screenshots of the attempt and the damage that I have here. Since everything in the fight is airborne artifacts are very strong, especially if you can get them closer to 40%, and Creamy being very bulky, you'll need Human Killer on whatever you can bring. This is the best Human Killer that I have. I should have one that goes up to 10%, but it's the best thing I can work with. And I know these boots are all off element and whatnot, but they're my highest airborne killers, so I kind of just have to work with them. You'll note everyone has a field ring that's max skill level 5. Due to the gear limitations, I don't have a second attack emblem that Lif can bring, because they're being used for other members of the other clears. One of the biggest challenges that you'll face is getting all the proper amps on your team. If your team doesn't cover an amp from a passive, then you'll need to have it on an accessory or an applicable equipment. So one thing this team lacks is Human Killer on a passive. Jubilant Laramelia gives herself 50%, so she doesn't need anything further. And in order to give Human Amp to Mikasa, I've used the Green Dragon Harp in the first slot, which gives her effectively 50% of her equipment order, a 20% amp. Mikasa also does not get airborne coverage from somebody else in the team, so I've given her the Star of Temptation to give her 25% airborne amp. And finally, I also don't have beast coverage on this team, so in this case I've given Mikasa a goddess ring, which at least covers 2 other allies 20% and gives herself 30%. Also for Creamy in particular, it's very important to ignore barriers, so as often as you can ignore a barrier, do so. Any gears that you have that shred the enemy's resistances is also good. This Luminous Crescent is a good example of that. Because Rimuru doesn't get human amp from anybody else in the party, I've given him the Hatsune band to amp human 20%. Also, I don't have Airborne on an all-ally passive, so I've given my DPS the Incorruptible Earrings. It isn't the best option because it's only 10 turns, which is about 50 seconds, so maybe 1/5 or 1/4 of the fight. It's not the best, but it's something. And hopefully you farmed more Dormant Justice than me, because this item is amazing for this fight. I wish I had like 3 5-stars. But other than that, my 2 clears are pretty tight. I have to manual them and I only have about 10 to 15 seconds left. At this point, there's over 100 people this cycle who've gotten the Nordicia clear. However, there's still only 48 people on Global who have cleared the Acer group in Asgard, and even less so in the newest Alfheim Elf group, only 17 clears on Global. So let's say you're in a situation like me where you've cleared 1 or 2 but you can't clear the 3rd. You won't be able to use any of the heroes or their gear equipped to try the other bosses. Once you've gotten the clear, they've effectively been used and you cannot switch. If you wanted to retry it with different gear, you'd have to reset or clear it again with the group and gear that you want to clear it with. If you're in the unfortunate situation like me where you're not able to get all 3 clears, then unfortunately you will not be getting all the gold orb shards as you can. You have to be able to clear all 3 to get the major rewards. And what's so cool about gold orbs? Well, they're just the next thing. These things aren't cheap either, so you'll need to reset a handful of times to get the 60. I was able to clear bosses and get 20 shards of it last time, but even then I'd need 60 to make 1 core, and that's just for 1 orb. But nowadays you'll see a lot of humans and Acer at gold 2 or gold 3, and I'm sure people will be trying to push up their elves to gold 2 as well. For those select few who are blessed enough to be able to clear it at this point, well, other than that, we have it here for another 3 days. And just another note that I didn't discuss when talking about it is that Omega Bomber will pierce through barrier and shields, so you can't just cheese it and ignore it. You will take a lot of damage when it goes off. Anyway, I hope this information helped you guys, and hopefully the next cycle that comes out, more people will be ready to push Heroic Wanderer and know what their account needs to have to be strong enough to clear it. But please like if you enjoy and subscribe if you vibe. And until next time, Foots out. Cheers.